Hello and welcome to this CDO interview series. My name is Eleanor Treharne Jones and I'm the CEO of Kensu. And I'm delighted to be speaking today with Salema Rice. Salema Rice is the Chief Executive Officer of CDO Today and also a 25-year tenured Chief Data and Analytics Officer with previous roles as a partner at Accenture, at Bain Capital and Allegis Group in an impressive career spanning multiple industries. Salema, thank you.
Thank you, Eleanor. Happy to be here today.
Everyone's talking about generative AI. Generative AI without a strong foundation of trust in data is clearly going to struggle. And you highlighted the importance of data quality and data governance as a foundation and underpinning for so much of what's possible within the kind of data team. How have you tackled achieving that kind of good data quality and data reliability in the various roles that you've had?
Well, data governance is typically, I would say, outside of financial services, is not easy to sell, right? So it's an investment, it's a time commitment, but the rewards are so great. And I think that especially in the generative AI now, we're seeing the importance of knowing that what you're producing, the output of generative AI is trustworthy, right? And so there's no way that you can trust your data without having that, concrete foundation there. It's like building your house on sand, right? And so for me, it was really around in the early days, like I said, in financial services, it was a lot easier in the sense of, being able to set up a framework, build the policies and procedures, work with audit to ensure that we're not building policies for the sake of building policies, and that, it's really going to be audited, and how we're managing data, how we're using data, how we're curating data, who has access to data. And really creating that single version of the truth, right? I mean, a lot of times we forget that if we don't master the data, you might have 80 or 100 variations of one vendor or one supplier. So how do you ever really, see the big picture unless you're putting in these foundational components? And so for me, like in financial services, I had responsibility for everything that kind of fell within the realm of data governance. So I asked to have the metadata, I have to have, reference data, the master data, and I think, and data quality as a part of that, so that it sort of tells a story of and interesting for Kensu, because back then we didn't have a data observability type tools. We actually relied on building models off the logs and off the metrics, and being able to really show the value of data governance through the metrics, right? To be able to tie it back to the cost of poor data quality. So that was a big success factor for me, right? Because, I'm trying to get funding for something and people are like, why do I want to invest in data, data governance? And so that's why now, as I mentor chief data officers, I tell them, like, if you're building a product, even if it's the smallest product you've ever built, don't skimp on the fact that you need to govern that data. You need to have the quality metrics in there. You need to have, all of the different control points of data management, check the box, because that's how you're going to know, like, you're going to feel so confident, and your customers are going to feel confident knowing that your models are that precise. I mean, when I first started, I remember 80-20 rule, right? If it's 80% right, we're going to use it. Well, tie that to your checking account balance, right? Like, that's probably not going to fly for many people. But, I think that we're in a different state, and we're seeing that, right? With GPT and these other Dolly and these other tools that are out there that, they're great, they're fun, but, like, do you really trust it? Like, you really need to fact check everything. It's a fun tool, but you wouldn't want to use that to make decisions about your organization.
So when you were looking at building that model, for the cost of poor data quality, were you attaching hard metrics to that? The time spent fixing kind of, issues within the data, or was it more the softer, harder to quantify kind of costs, as you said, like trust, and the kind of interrelationship between data teams and the kind of the users of that data? Were you able to incorporate both, or how did you approach it?
Yeah, I mean, so I think that for me, I always looked at it as different risk factors, right? Like, does having bad data quality cause us financial risk? Does it cause us reputational risk? Like, and I think that depending upon where it falls in the spectrum, I think that it's easier to align. I think that, by having a business owner, ideally where the entry point is of the data, right, needs to own that data, to say, if we're actually putting garbage in, we're going to get garbage out. So it's an expectation that you should set within the organization of, what's an acceptable data quality range. And depending upon the type of problem, it can be very variable, right? I mean, it really just depends on the type of problem you're solving, the type of industry you're in. If you're in biotech, right, and you're building you're looking for the cure for cancer, right? I mean, there's it's different than, if you're trying to make sure that, your checking account always has the right balance in it, or, I think that it is definitely a combination, but I think that it's a critical factor to have those metrics, both on the side of, here's what risk I'm willing to take, but also on how much, so applying a dollar amount to what this is costing us as an organization, both in time and in dollars, is another way to not only bring visibility to your senior leadership, but also I think the board is almost taking a look at that. And it does something to your culture for the people in the organization to know that we are the type of company, like we say we're going to, like, everybody, right? Like every company today says we're data driven, right? But if you're data driven and you don't have those things, like it's kind of like, a veil, right? I mean, like, we don't want anyone to see behind the veil because, we know that we want to be data driven, but if your chief data officer is not in a position to be the change agent within your organization, how data driven can you really be?
And a great way, again, to align with what the business objectives are by aligning on the various risk tolerance levels within the organization, because they may differ from what perhaps the data team thinks those risk tolerances.
Absolutely.
Before we move off the topic of data quality, what do you think are in 2023, what are the top initiatives that a chief data officer should be focused on this year to address data quality and data governance?
Well, I think right now, like I said, I would really focus on the products themselves. I think that chief data officers are in a very interesting place where, I don't know, a lot of articles say like the average chief data officer tenure is something like 2 years, which seems crazy to me. But I think that this concept of chief data officers that thrive or chief data officers that dive, it really centers around being able to have the organization trust you. And so they don't just want to trust that the data is good, but they want to trust you as an individual, that, that you have their best interests at heart, right? I mean, we used to see a lot of silos, right? I mean, and I think that for some industries, the data silos are still probably much larger than they should be. There's always going to be, some level of data silos, but to me, when you're building out the data organization, and if trust in data quality and being able to show your customers, that everything you do is based around these quality fact-based decisioning, then it seems to me that the model that you want of your chief data office is very kind of hub and spoke, right? You want data quality to be embedded in each functional layer, right? Like HR analytics are critically important, but the quality metrics of HR analytics or HR data is very different than that in financial services where they're very GL driven, right? And so having individuals with that hub and spoke model that are looking at the quality components and building out those not just the risk tolerances, but the risk factors within each of those organizations, but having a dotted line to the chief data officer or within the chief data officer's organization to make sure we're all using the same libraries. We're all using the same data catalogs. We're all using the same tools and technology so that as we look at, things like observability and these other types of tools that can bring the view together, that we have a more holistic view of not just where the data is, but who's using it, why are they using it, what are the outcomes? Like these are things that, 20 years ago, why data even started becoming sexy, because board of directors would get 10, 15 different reports and they would have the same measure on every report with a different value. And they're like, throwing their hands in the air, like somebody do something. And that's kind of how chief data officers even came about, right? I mean, and so I think that right now, chief data officers are in a critical place where as they're building out these new products, that in 2023, they can really focus on a very small number of attributes and be able to show the business, show their customers, internal and external, really a view of not just the outcome of the product itself, but how valuable the data is that's used within that product, to be able to tell that story of here's what happened, here's why it happened, here's what's going to happen next, right? And be able to deliver that kind of in a single package.
Salema, thank you so much for talking to us today. It's been an absolute pleasure, and I'm sure there's so much more that we could have covered. For more interviews like this, please do go to cdomagazine.tech, and thank you very much for your time.
Thank you.